Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Ayin Tet and Batra. We are continuing in 79. We're on 79a. We are continuing in the fifth perek of referred to as Hamochar Hasfina, and we are dealing with the sales of certain items and what's included in them. So, having talked in our Mishnah about the sale of a dump, the fact that it includes the manure that is in there, the Gemara quotes a Mishnah that addresses many of the different categories that we had in our Mishnah and relates it to hektish, to sanctification, to consecration. So we're going to see that there are three different types of consecration. So let's jump right in, and I'm going to share my screen. So let me do that, and we will get started. So here we go, and here we go. So in the Mishnah that we learned yesterday, we mentioned that when one sells a dump, the manure is included. The Gemara now quotes a Mishnah regarding consecrating items, which will mention the consecration of a dump and other items, again, mentioned in our Mishnah. And so this Mishnah is from Me'ila, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. So Machar Ashba, we're at the two dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the 11th line of the Gemara on Ayin Tet Amud Aleph, Makar Ashba, Makar Zavla. If you sell a dump, you've sold the manure that is there, meaning that the waste that's there is going to be good manure, good fertilizer, and you're going to that's going to be assumed to be included in your sale. So Tanan Hasam, we learned over there again the Mishnah in Me'ila Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Kol haroy lemizbeach v'lo lebedek habayit lebedek habayit v'lo lemizbeach lo lemizbeach v'lo lebedek habayit. So three different categories. Let's go through those categories. Molin behen u'b'masha b'tochat. In each of these three categories, if you can be moel, there's a violation of me'ila, of using something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash when you didn't realize that it belonged to the Beit HaMikdash, if when it comes to the item itself and what is inside. Mm-hmm. So let's go through the three categories. Category number one is, again, Kol Haroi Lemizbeach V'lo Lebedek Habayit, something that's fit for the altar and therefore cannot be used for the upkeep or for the equipment of the Beit HaMikdash itself. So what is that referring to? Let's take a look at Rashbam. We're going to do the first three. We're going to do the three Rashbams to cover each of the three categories. So we're 1, 2, 3, 6, 9 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam. Maybe 8 lines down is the first end of the line. Kol haroilam is be'ach v'lo lebedek habayit. Kigon shor v'keseb v'ez. So when you have an ox, a sheep, a goat, tamimim that is without a mum, it is whole, it is complete. The hamatbis tamimim lebedek habayis, because if you were to take an animal that is fit for the Beis Hamikdash to be brought as a korban, and you were to say, I'm not using it as a korban, I'm instead going to use it for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, over ba'aseh, you have violated a positive commandment, meaning, look, it's not a negative commandment, you haven't violated something, a lo taseh, but you have done something inappropriate. And one can understand why, because the whole point of this is to say that we want you to bring animals that could potentially be used as a sacrifice, B'chein Torim, and similarly, what else is in this first category of Ubnei Yona, the various kinds of birds that are offered as sacrifices, soles, the grain, lavona, the lavona, which is a kind of spice, B'yayin, wine, v'shemen, and oil, kol hanach, Gufan Ra'il Mizbeach. Each of these items, they themselves are fit to go on the altar. Ve'ein Ra'il Kavshan Bebinyan. And they're not fit. You aren't supposed to use them to construct the building. So that's category number one. All right, category number two, lebedek habayit v'lo lemizbeach. Of course, the opposite situation where it's fit for the usage within the temple, but not for on the altar.
Right.
So what are examples of that? Again, continuing on in the Rashbam, kagon zahav, like gold, the kesef, and silver, v'avanim yikarot, and precious stones, the kiyotz behen, and the like. Meaning, for example, gold is going to be used in gold vessels that are in the Beit HaMikdash, the silver in silver vessels. The stones are going to be used in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and the like. Meaning, there are a lot of different kinds of things that can get used in the Beit HaMikdash. So that's category number two. And lo zeh v'lo
But how could you bring those on the Mizbeach? Gold isn't going to burn. Silver, it will not burn.
No. That's the whole point. The lo lemizbeach. These are items that are for bedek habayit that can be used directly in the Beit HaMikdash, but are not on the altar.
I understand. So what would be the hava? I mean, how could you even think that you could put them on the Mizbeach to burn it as a korban?
It's not. There is no hava, meaning the point is that we're discussing the three categories. Given the fact that we needed to note with respect to the first category, so you're asking an interesting question, right? Because why not just say lebedek habayit? Why do you need to say lebedek habayit v'lo lemizbeach? So I would suggest to you that the reason that they use the double language is because we needed to use the double language for haroy lemizbeach, because things that are fit for the mizbeach, we're not supposed to use them for bedek habayit. And so therefore, when we say kol haroy lemizbeach, it means v'lo lebedek habayit. So we need to specifically say that. And once we're using that parallel language, so then, and indeed, of course, in the third category, we need to specifically note that there's a category that says where it's not fit either for the Mizbeach or bedek habayit. And so let's take a look at that category. And that explains, because the first category and the third category are going to refer to both. So that's why we're going to, note in the second category, not only that it's lebedek habayit, but it's not lemizbeach. But you're absolutely right. Anything that would be lebedek habayit clearly would not be for the mizbeach. V'lo lezeh, and of course, yeah.
In the first case, it's there you have the shore and the sand and so forth. You could think that maybe I could use them to
carry loads in the Beit HaMikdash,
something for the bedek habayit and so forth. But to think that, well, how could I use? I'm not going to burn gold. I mean,
100%. Again, I don't think that it's actually absolutely necessary, but for parallel language, they're not going to say when they say the other two categories, they reference what it's fit for and what it's not fit for, and they separate the two categories of mizbeach and bedek habayit. So then we're definitely going to describe the middle category in the same way. So lo lezeh, what is that talking about? It's not fit. Again, now we're talking about things that are not fit for use directly in the Beit HaMikdash, and they're not fit for the altar. Kagon chalav, like milk, gvina, cheese, morayis, this brine, ashba, a dump, asavim, grasses, the kiyotz behen, and things like them. Like most things are in this last category, right? If I were to be makdish my home or something, it would be also something that obviously could not be used within the Beit HaMikdash. But kol hani de katani rishon chashuv. And the ordering of these three categories, where the first was for the altar, the second was for the actual use, and the third is monetary. So they are in the order of their importance. The kachim mizbeach hashivi mikache bedek habayit, right? If it's a fit for the mizbeach, that's more important than if it's fit for just the usage in the Beit HaMikdash. Mikache bedek habayit hashivi mikache demayim. she'ein ra'ayon gufan lo lemizbeach v'lo lebedek habayit. And and then the holiness of bedek habayit is more important than the holiness associated with I'm sorry, mikodesh damim. I apologize. That should be from the things that where it's just has a monetary value, where and it's not fit itself to go on the mizbeach or or to be used for the actual usage within the Beit Hamikdash. Elalimkar, but rather you sell them, and then you either use the money, the proceeds, to buy things for the mizbeach, o bedek habayit, or for the taking care of the Beit Hamikdash. Hakol kamosha perish b'shah shehektish. So when you sanctify, if I sanctify, if this table were to belong to me and I were to sanctify it, and now it's not something that could be used in the Beis Hamikdash because it's not the proper tables, and it's not certainly doesn't go on the altar. It's not on the altar. So what you would do, I would have in mind, why am I sanctifying this? Am I sanctifying it so that the money, the proceeds are used to buy an animal to bring on the mizbeach? Or am I sanctifying it so that the proceeds are used to take care of the well-being of the Beit Hamikdash? So whichever one, all hakol kamosha pirish b'shah she'ektish, whatever I express during the moment that I've consecrated the item, that's what it'll be. Hilkach lozu afzu katani. So what we see is that these three categories are building on each other. That not only is there going to be me'ila with respect to something that literally goes on the mizbeach, but also even something that you're going to use within the mizbeach. And not only something that you're going to use within the mizbeach, but even something where all it is money value for and not only money value, but even money value for the mizbeach, and not only that, but even if it's just money value for the upkeep of the Beit Hamikdash, all of those will be considered something that is subject to me'ila. Delomi by hana kamai dechamiri demoalin b'masha betochan. That not only when it comes to the first items are we going to say, meaning the items that are subject to, that are for the base for the altar, that we're going to say that they sanctify what's inside them. Ela afilu hanak basrai, even the later ones are going to be that way. Mo'alin nami b'masha betochan. That not only do you when you consecrate the item, or do you also consecrate the item inside it? But when you do me'ila on the item inside it, that's also going to be me'ila. Okay, so let's talk a lot. Let's understand what are those kinds of things. So ketzad, what is the situation where you sanctify something and you get the thing inside it? Well, hektish bor malaya mayim. If you consecrate a pit that's filled with water, ashbos malaya zebel, a dump filled with manure, shovah malo yonim, a dovecote filled with doves, sedei malaya asavim, a field filled with grasses, ila nasui peiros, a tree carrying the fruit, mo'alin bahen umash betochan. In each case, since you consecrated when it was full, not only is the item consecrated, the pit, the trash, etc., but the contents are consecrated. However, if you have an empty pit that you consecrate, and then it becomes filled with water, a dump, and then it becomes filled with manure, a dove coat, and then it becomes filled with doves, a tree, and then it becomes filled with fruit, the field, and then it becomes filled with grasses. Mo'alin bahen ve'ein mo'alin mash betochan. Then you're going to obviously the item that you actually consecrated is subject to me'ila, but there is no me'ila with respect to the contents, because the contents weren't there when you sanctified it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says no. With at least respect to two of these categories, it's not going to be the case. That hamakdish es hasada ve'es ha'ilan. If you consecrate the field or the tree, well then mo'alin bahen u'bigiduleihem. Then not only will you have done me'ila, not only can you do me'ila with the items themselves, but even with respect to the produce that grows there. Because they have grown from hektish, and so they are considered part of hektish. So let's take a look at the Rashbam, Moel and Bahen, as he adds a caveat with which Tosos is going to disagree. So let's take a look and we'll see it inside. So Moel and Bahen, second wide line, towards the end of the line in Rashbam. If you benefited from them, shava pruta, the value of a pruta, kagon hatzneach hafatzav bebor, like you hid your items in the pit. Oh, horid sham chavis shalmayim lekarer, or as you know, if you have a basement, right, that the basement is colder, so you put some water in a pitcher into the pit in order to cool it down. And of course, that's a benefit for you. So you've gotten some benefit. Or you hang your items on the tree. Or you put your birds in the dovecote. Or you put the manure into the dump. In all of those cases, according to the Rashbam, you've used the item that belonged to the Beit HaMikdash, and you're not allowed to use other people's things, and you're not allowed to use even things that belong to the Beit HaMikdash without permission. So we are going to, right now, we're going to have Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, that they're the ones who are arguing. So, okay, so let's take a look at Tosos. Tosos has a big problem with what Rashi says, with what Rashbam says. Here's no, Rashi's not back. I misspoke. But Rashi will be back in a couple of months when we're into Sanhedrin, God willing. So Perish Bekuntris. So although a kuntris literally means like the notes. So here. It's referring to the Rashbam. Sheyesh me'ila b'masha aniach chafetzav babor. That of course the Rashbam said that you can have me'ila with respect to the pit by putting your property into the pit as a storage. There's a problem with that. The ein nira la Rabbeinu Tam, but that does not seem to be correct according to Rabbeinu Tam. D'amar behashaleach, because we learned back in Maseches Gittin. Ubeparak Sanhedrin, and we will learn in the first parak of Sanhedrin, Hamakdish Avado, that if you consecrate your slave, Ein Molin Bisaro, you can't perform Me'ila with respect to his hair. Mashum de Idkash Lekarkos, because it is as if it is connected to him. He is like earth, and Alma de Ein Me'ila B'Mechubar. We say that we seem to derive the principle that you cannot actually perform me'ila. You can't use something without permission from the Beis HaMikdash if it's attached to the ground. And so as a result, me'ila is if I eat the apple that was consecrated. But if I just hang something on a tree or put something in the pit, that is not sufficient. So therefore, if we skip down to the second to last line, beginning of the line of the Tosos, and he gives another example from Maseches Me'ila of showing that it needs to be that if it's mechuber lekarka, then it's not going. There's no meila. So v'amar Rabbeinu Tam d'shaycha meila bebor kagon she'akar chulya min habor. You took some of the dirt out of the pit, v'nen mimena, and then you benefited from that. So the point is that you benefited from the things that were in the pit. That's how you can have something that's you're benefiting from the pit. So that is an important clarification from Tosos. Tosos.
So are they discussing? I'm sorry. Are they discussing an item that was that was placed in the bore or something that was already in the bore?
Oh,
Right?
so
There is a
remember,
difference.
yes, there is a very big difference. So let's talk about, let's clarify that, because I think you're right to raise the issue. So um so first of all, the Mishnah said that when it comes to consecrating a pit, it needs to the thing that that the insides need to already be there in order for them to be subject to Me'ilah. So that's
Right.
point number one. So when it comes to this dirt, I'm understanding it as that is the dirt that is essentially the ground underneath the bottom of the pit. Because remember, we saw that the difference between a pit and a cistern, even though effectively the pit is being used to hold water, is really just, is it lined with a stone lining? And a pit does not have the stone lining, and so as a result, that would be you would have the ability to sort of dig into the pit and thereby take earth out of the pit, and that would be, by taking that earth, then you would have violated Me'ilah, because that was part of the pit, and now it's not, and it's separated from the ground, and now you've benefited from it, and so therefore that's going to be a problem.
But what's the machloket there between the Rashbam and Tosfot? The Ikar machloket.
The Ikar machlokas is, Rashbam says that in order to use a pit and violate Me'ilah, all you have to do is store something in it. But Tosfos says that is like using something that's mechuber lakarka, and using something that's mechuber lakarka is not Me'ilah. So as a result, he says, no, it's got to be that you're using the dirt out of the pit. So now Stan has a question.
In previous Gemara, we learned that if you sell property in the house, it can and it cannot come with a stove. But isn't a pit lined with rock considered a stove? Or is that
no? So usually the stoves that we're talking about are generally above ground.
I didn't even know that.
And yes, but not below ground. And certainly when we use the term pit, we're almost always using it in the sense of a thing for water.
A bore.
Yeah, exactly. A
But
bore.
But is it a
water.
cistern for water?
A cistern, the difference between the cistern and a pit is what I was just highlighting. A cistern has been lined, especially, whereas a pit just has rough walls. So, and obviously you might, at least I would choose to use the water of a cistern for drinking, and the water of a pit for, maybe washing clothes, etc.
The Gemara doesn't speak anything about
wells. We do have wells. We do talk about
the
wells.
Process for pumping the well.
So no, obviously those wells were not pumped wells, and they were
springs, more or less.
There were either springs, or they were touching down into the aquifer, and you would lower a pail and into the area.
Does it have a big pail then in this wheel?
I don't know. That's a good question. The probably regular size pail. They're not going to have super large pails, because then you got to pull it out of the well, and then it gets very heavy when it's filled with water. Okay, so
here we're talking about storage. It has to be designated for storage.
No, even if the pit was designated for storage, the problem is that the pit is by definition attached to the ground, and according to Tosfos, you cannot do Me'ilah with something that's attached to the ground.
So neither the pit nor anything that's in it could be subject to Me'ilah then.
No. Well, of course, if there was already water in the pit and you take the water out of the pit, that would 100% be Me'ilah, according to the Mishnah. Absolutely. The point is how do you do Me'ilah with an empty pit? That's the question that the Rashbam and Tosfos are.
And they mentioned it's for storage. If it's an empty pit and you would designate.
No, but if you're, again, according to Tosfos, storage isn't a good enough reason, because yes, absolutely, Rashbam would say storage is a problem, and you've done Me'ilah with respect to the pit. The problem is Tosfos points out that there are a couple of Gemaras that seem to suggest that Me'ilah does not apply when something is attached to the ground, and the benefit that you're getting by storing something in a pit is from the ground. And so as a result, that would seem to not be me'ila according to Tosfos. Therefore, Tosfos says that the benefit cannot come from storing something in the pit. It has to come from taking away the dirt that is effectively in the pit.
Okay, so the Rashbam is saying that if one uses the pit for storage, and the pit and everything stored within it is subject to me'ila?
No. So again, right? The Rashbam was trying to answer the question: how do you perform me'ila with respect to an empty pit? So if you dedicate a pit to the Beit HaMikdash, and now Moshe comes and puts something in it, according to the Rashbam, Moshe has violated me'ila. If now I come and take and use the item that Moshe put in that pit, nobody says that I violated me'ila, because the item was not in the pit at the time that you consecrated it, Ken. And so as a result, there's no question as to whether or not that would be me'ila. And that's not the issue that we're dealing with. The issue that Rashbam and Tosfos are dealing with is how do you perform me'ila when you have an empty pit? When you have a full pit, it's clear how you perform me'ila.
Right.
You take some of the water out.
Right.
That's going to be the problem. Okay, so that's the situation. So
So
now
if we
we're going
put something in there, then it becomes, if it's an empty pit, you put something in there that violates me'ila on the pit.
according to the Rashbam. Yes.
Right, Rashbam, okay.
Okay, so now the Gemara quotes a brisa regarding this debate. Rabbi Yossi said that that a tree or a field, the consecration of it will include the things that will fill it, namely the produce and the grasses. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're not included. So now we're going to get the opinion of Rebbe with respect to how he thinks about these two opinions. So Tanya, Amar Rebbe, near in Divrei Rebbe Yehuda before V'shovach, it makes some sense that Rebbe Yehuda's opinion with respect to the pit and the dovecote, namely that if they're full, then you've done me'ila with respect to then me'ila applies both to the pit and to its contents, and to the dovecote and to its contents. But when they're empty and then later get filled, so then the me'ila would only apply to the items itself, the pit or the dovecote, and not to the contents, because the contents came later. And v'divrei Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi makes more sense, v'sada v'ilan, when it comes to the field and the tree. Because when it comes to the field and the tree, if it comes naturally, and so as a result, not only, even if the field is empty and the tree is empty, if later the field becomes filled with grasses and the tree becomes filled with fruit, not only are the field and the tree subject to me'ila, but even the grasses and the fruit are subject to me'ila. So, one second. How could Rebbe make this statement? Because it has some implications that make no sense. But let's first highlight what does make sense. Bishlama Nirin Divrei Rebbe Yehuda Bevor V'shovach. It makes sense to say that Rebbe thinks that the opinion of Rebbe Yehuda is what makes a lot of sense with respect to the pit and the dovecote, because Miklal de Palag Asada V'ilan. Because the implication is that Rabbi Yehuda there's an argument about a field and a tree. And indeed, there is an argument. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi disagree about a field and a tree. And that's true. So that's fine. But Elanirin Divrei Rabbi Yossi B'sada V'ilan, Miklal de Palig B'vor V'shovach. But Rebbe's second statement says that that what Rabbi Yossi says makes sense when it comes to a field or a tree. But that's the only thing that Rabbi Yossi talked about. And yet that implies, when I say that you're right with respect to A, it implies that I think you're wrong with respect to B. But you didn't say it. Rabbi Yossi didn't say anything about B. Miklal de Palig B'vor V'shovach. V'ha Rabbi Yossi V'sada V'ilan Kamar. Rabbi Yossi was only talking about a field and a tree. V'chi Tema L'dvarav de Rabbi Yehuda Kamar. And if you want to say, you know what? Really, Rabbi Yossi disagrees also with respect to a pit and a dovecote. And he was just saying to Rabbi Yehuda, you, Rabbi Yehuda, should at least agree with me with respect to the field and the tree. But that's not true. Bahatanya, Amar Rebbe Yossi, Ein Ani Roa Divrei Shel Rebbe Yehuda Bisad Ilan. I disagree with Rebbe Yehuda with respect to the field and the tree, because they are the growth of hektish. So we see from this that it's only with respect to the tree and the field that Rebbe Yossi disagrees. It's only there where he disagrees. When it comes to the pit and the dovecote, he sees the point of view. He agrees with the point of view of Rebbe Yehuda's logic. And so as a result, we can't say that that really the dispute is larger than what we said. So we have to therefore reread Rebbe's statement. So Hachikamar, this is what Rebbe is really saying. Nirin dibre Rebbe Yehuda le Rebbe Yossi bevor v'shovach. What he was saying is similar to the brisa that we just cited, that the words of Rebbe Yehuda, in the opinion of Rebbe Yossi, are correct with respect to the pit and the dovecote. Sha'af Rebbe Yossi lo nechlaku alav ela b'sad v'ilan, because Rebbe Yossi only disagrees with respect to a field or a tree. But when it comes to the pit and the dovecote, Rebbe Yossi agrees. So that's all he's trying to say. All right. So Tana Rabbanan.
We don't know that, right? That's his opinion.
That's what Rebbe says. Rebbe,
right.
I mean,
Rebbe
we
Yossi
know.
didn't actually say that.
Correct. But we're reading that into Rebbe's statement because Rebbe's statement on its face seems very problematic because it suggests an argument that doesn't exist. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan, Hekdishan Rekanin, Va'achar Kaknis Malo. So we have this, I'm sorry for not scrolling, so let me scroll a little bit. Here we go. So now the Gemara quotes a brisa that identifies a potentially new position. And we'll see, in the end, we're going to try and align it with positions that we have. So Hekdishan Rekanin, Va'achar Kaknis Malo. We have, if you say that something is hektish, when it's empty, and now it becomes full. Moel and behen, ve'ein moel and b'masha b'tochan. You only can do me'ila with respect to the item itself, not with respect to its contents. Okay, because of course the contents weren't there when you sanctified it, when you consecrated it. So Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omar. No, you can even do me'ila with respect to the contents. Whoa! So that's potentially a new position. Okay, if we were to say that this is a position only with respect to a field and a tree, well, then this will align with the prior machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. But if this is now talking about a pit and a shovach and a dovecote, well, then this would be a totally new view. So Amar Rabba machlokas b'sad v'ilan. No, Rabba comes and says, no, the machlokas is just by a field and a tree. The Tanakama savar like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanakama thinks like Rabbi Yehuda that the produce is not subject to Mila. But Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon savar like Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, thinks like Rabbi Yossi. Aval bavor v'shovach, meaning that that the contents will be subject to the Me'ila. After in the things that grow in the items afterwards. Aval bavor v'shovach. But when it comes to a pit or a dovecote, you can do me'ila with respect to the item itself, but not with respect to contents that come later. So that all works. The problem is, Amrle Abaye points out, but one second, that brisa, it also says the following: Hekdishan milayin. If you consecrate something that is full, moel and behen, u'b'masha b'tochan. The Tanakhama says you do me'ila with it and the stuff that's inside. Now that works according to the view that we had, because that was the view according to everybody. But the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon machlif, but Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon reverse, meaning they had said that they say that the contents are not consecrated. So they have a remarkable position that when you are makdish something that is full, the contents are not hektish and are not subject to me'ila. So that doesn't work according to what Rabbah just said. Rabbah said that it's that we're talking about Rabbah said that we're talking about a field and a tree. But we can't be talking about a field and a tree because everybody agrees that if you are makdish a full tree and a full field, that you are going to include the items that are on the tree and are in the field. So ve'ibisadeh ve'ilan amai machlif. Why would Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, why would he reverse his opinion? Why would he say something that is so illogical? Ella Amar Rabbah. So actually, Rabbah makes his statement, and he comes to the opposite conclusion. Machlokas bavor v'shovach. As we turn, we're now on ayin tedem bet. The machlokas must be when it comes to the pit and the dovecote. Aval besada ve'ilan. But when it comes to the tree or the field, divrei hakol molen behen u'mash b'tochan. Then everybody agrees that me'ila will apply with respect to both the item itself and the contents, even though the contents are coming later. Uchavod.
Wait, even if they're coming later? Where do we get that?
Even if they're coming later, because this again, listen to the brisa. The brisa is specifically saying that the machlokes is when the item was empty and became full. The Tanna Kama says the contents are subject to Me'ilah, and Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon says that the contents are not subject to Me'ilah. So when it comes to the field, if they're arguing with respect to the dovecote and the pit, well, then everybody, first of all, the Tanna Kama must say that the later growth is going to be included. And if they're only arguing with respect to one, then it must be that Rabbi Lazar Bar Shimon agrees with the Tanna Kama with respect to the field and the trees, meaning that everybody in this brisa is going to be agreeing with Rabbi Yossi, that everybody in this brisa agrees with Rabbi Yossi's view that the gedule hektish is definitely hektish. So that's yes, absolutely. Uchavodu shavach. So now when we have a pit and a bevor of a shovach, berekanin b'mai pligi. So tell me the disagreement about when it's empty, ubemilayin b'mai pligi, and tell me about the disagreement when it's full, because again, it does seem a little bit odd because Rabbi Lazar changes his viewpoint that when it's empty, he says that the what comes later will be hektish, but when it's full, the item itself is hektish, but not the contents. So let's take a look and see how that can be. So bereikanin pligi bepulukta de Rabbi Meir v'Rabbanan. When it's empty, the disagreement between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Lazar is really about the same item that the Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan disagree about. And what is that? The Tanna Kama savarla k'Rabbanan de amri ein adam makne davar shelo bala olam, that a person cannot transfer something that has not yet come into the world. And so therefore, even though the Tanna Kama might want to say that the water that comes into the pit later should be subject to Me'ilah and is hektish, he can't, because the person who makes the pit hektish doesn't have, and it does not exist in the world at the moment, water in the pit. And so as a result, he cannot transfer that yet because it doesn't yet exist in a form that he can transfer it. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, says, Sabar, Rabbi Meir, he thinks like Rabbi Meir, Da'amar Adam Magna Davar Shelo B'Olam. You can transfer something that has not yet come into the world. So therefore, you can transfer the water if your intention is that the water should also be consecrated. Now you can transfer it.
It's something funny there. I was thinking about the progressives want to tax unrealized capital gains.
There you go. Yes, the question is yes, 100%. Is it a real thing or is it not a real thing? 100%. Absolutely. Amar deshamat lay Rebbe Meir. So in second, but one second, where did we hear Rebbe Meir's statement with respect to the fact that you can be makna something that was not yet in the world, could go Paris dekel, when it's talking about the fruit of a dekel tree? That is something de avide de asu. It's something that's going to happen. It's likely to be to occur. So hani miyemer de asu, but who knows whether the pit will end up getting filled with water and the shovach will get filled with doves. So maybe they won't. So Amarava Mishkachasla, we're going to talk about where it's found, meaning B'mayim Habam Derech Hatzer Labor. The water is coming by the way of the person's courtyard. So presumably the courtyard has been pitched in a way that will fill the pit with water. B'yonim Habam Derech Shovcho L'Shovach. And he has another dovecote that is filled with doves. So naturally, this dovecote will also be filled with doves, even if it isn't filled with doves at the moment. So, okay, so now we understand what they're arguing about if it's empty, that the argument is really about, can you be makdish something that doesn't yet exist? The Tanakama says no. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Yossi says yes. What about when they're filled? And why is it that that Rebbe Elazar reverses his viewpoint and says that when you consecrate a filled pit, the pit is consecrated and not the water? So,
but in the other case, in this case, we just discussed. With the Gemara specifically, or who's this, Rabbi Meir, specifically be referring to something that would naturally fill this. Now, in first, in the courtyard where water flows, you build it for water. But let's say somebody comes and throws his dung in there, and now you can't use it for water. Does that dung become consecrated because it filled that area? It's not designated for dung. It's dung. It's designated for water.
So I would say no. I think that the what the Gemara is saying that is by clarifying that this case is only talking about what is expected to be in it. Everybody would agree. Even Rebbe Meir would agree. And even Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon would agree that when it comes to something random that gets thrown into the pit, no, but that is definitely not going to be hektish. And therefore, it will not be consecrated. And we're dealing, again, remember, we're dealing with a situation with a person who consecrates the pit and wants the water that is going to be in the pit to be consecrated with it. And therefore, it's his intention that the water be included. So obviously, it's not his intention for the dung to be included. So as a result, that would clearly not be included. So now what about the situation when you consecrate it when it's full? Why would it be that Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon would say that the contents is not consecrated? So Amarava Kegon Shehiktish Bor Stam. In that situation, we're dealing with a situation where you did not explicitly say you wanted to include the water. The Rebbe Elazar,
it sounds like the Gemara we learned earlier.
Yes, exactly.
I'm selling my house,
that.
But I'm not selling the furniture inside the house.
100%.
But I'm not going to sell you. And then you have to make a path for the person to get into it.
You're being mechavan to the Gemara. We're exactly going to say that. But Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon, Savar Lakavua. Rebbe Elazar, the son of Rebbe Shimon, thinks like his father, Rebbe Shimon. Da Amar Danin Din Gavoa Midin Hediot. We derive the laws of hektish from the law of a regular person. Ma din hediot. What's the law with respect to a regular person? Matzi Amar. The seller can say, Bira Zabini Lach, I sold you the pit. Maya Lo Zabini Lach, I didn't sell you the water. Afdin Gavoa. So too with respect to things that belong to Hashem. Bira Aktish, Maya Lo Aktish. I consecrated the pit. I didn't consecrate the water. Again, that's key is that he didn't make it explicit. He was generic. He was not, he didn't do any kind of specification. So we'll read these words in the words in parentheses in the Gemara because it helps clarify things. But Tanakama, Sabar ain't done and din gavoa midin hediot. And the Tanakama says we don't derive the law of hektish from the law of a regular person. That you could, of course, say that actually, or you could just say he disagrees with Rabbi Shimon. and says that the point is that we say and this might be what it's saying, which is that when we comes to, remember, we saw that Rabbi Shimon is the one who says that when it comes to hektish, you're just as strict. You sell ba'ayin ra just like you're makdish with ayin ra, just like you sell ba'ayin ra. But
I'm reminded of ayin
but
tova and
hold
ayin
on, let me finish.
ra'ah.
But exactly, that's what I'm saying. But the rabbis said in that that even if you say that you sell ba'ayin ra, when it comes to hektish, we're going to say that you're makdish ba'ayin tov. And so as a result, the Tanakama here could be saying that you're being makdish ba'ayin tov, and therefore, if you say stam that you're consecrating the pit, you are going to consecrate the water that is in it. And so that's the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rebbe Lazar in the second part of that brisa. V'din hedyot lo. Oh, 1 second. You're going to tell me that when you sell that when it comes to a pit that you sell, that if you sell the pit, you don't include the water? V'hatnan. We had a Mishnah. Makar bor, makar meimav. In fact, that was the Mishnah that we learned at the end of the day yesterday. It actually gave that as one of the examples. Makar bor, makar meimeha is what we said. So, Amarava masnisin yechidahi, even though our Mishnah was not explicitly the viewpoint of one individual Tana, we can say that in fact it is the viewpoint of one individual Tana, because listen to the brisa, and with that we'll conclude. Titania, we have a brisa, makar bor, lo makar meimav, that if you sell a pit, you don't in a stam way, in a without specification, then you have not sold the water. But Rabbi Nassan Omer, just like our Mishnah, Rabbi Nassan says, makar bor, makar meimav. If you sell a pit, you have sold the water. So our Mishnah is actually Rabbi Nassan. And so we went through this entire process to say, how can this Baraisa be consistent with our Mishnah? And in the end, we say that our Mishnah is actually the viewpoint of one person, and the general view, the view of the majority, is that if you sell a pit, you do not sell the water that's with it. That brings
that's saying that ayin ra'ah is greater than ayin tova.
Well, it's saying,
in a sense,
saying that, well, it's not. Remember that there are a couple of categories. There are things. There are three categories of items. There are things that 100% are always going to be included in the item that you sell. Then there are things that are never going to be included in the item that you sell if you don't make any specifications. And then there's a middle category where we have the machlokas of ayin ra and ayin tov. So the question of how one deals with the water could be part of the machlokas about ayin ra and ayin tov, or it could be that the question is part of, is it considered something that's always included or always not included? But the bottom line is you may very well be right, that effectively we're saying that our Mishnah referenced an ayin tov outlook, very much a Rabbi Akiva outlook. Rabbi Akiva said that you sell ba'ayin tov, and the ayin tova, and the majority opinion in the brisa, the Tanakama in the brisa, is saying that it's that the water is not sold. So next time we bring us to the next Mishnah, we're going to.
But we've discussed previously that generally a Braita has to agree with the Mishnah. It can't really contradict the Mishnah. And here
no. A Braisa can absolutely contradict the Mishnah. A Braisa absolutely can contradict the Mishnah. The key question will be, if you have a Braisa that doesn't have any disagreement, or a Mishnah that doesn't have any disagreement, and now you have a Braisa, or vice versa. So you need to be able to explain how they're consistent, or if there's a viewpoint in the multiple viewpoints in a Mishnah, and you have one viewpoint in a Brisa, and the Brisa is inconsistent with all of the viewpoints of the Mishnah, well, then you need to be able to explain what's going on. But here we have a situation where the Mishnah provides one viewpoint. We have a Brisa with two viewpoints, so that's completely consistent. The Mishnah is according to one of the viewpoints in the Brisa. And that's totally fine. And clearly that would be the viewpoint that Rebbe would hold. And that's why Rebbe included the Mishnah according to Rebbe Nassan. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way we hold. Indeed, it seems like if we take a look at the Aleph that is provided by the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, it seems that Makar Bar Lo Makar Meimav. You actually don't sell the water with a pit if you have not specified it. So, all right. So next, that brings us to the next Mishnah, which discusses purchasing the produce of various items. And what does that mean to include? What does it exclude? For the discussion of that, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. Have a great day.
I understand just one point. I understand the Bryce obviously can contradict. It comes to discuss the Mishnah or contradicts. They bring Bryces through all, but generally, I'm thinking that when I recall maybe incorrectly that the Mishnah is codified because it's strong and the Bryces are on the outside. They're outside the Beit HaMikdash, Beit HaMidrash.
Yes.
So the Mishnah is we codify law according to the Mishnah. The Brisa, they have discussions, but I don't know that the Brisa takes precedence over Mishnah.
Not usually 100%, but here this is one of those exceptions because it seems like what you end up with based on the fact that you have this machlokas between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon, and that Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Shimon, and the Tanakama, and we end up saying that it seems like Rabbi Lazar is based on the view that is contrary. I'm sorry, the Tanakama is based on the view that is different from our Mishnah. And so as a result, we answer that by explaining it, by saying that it's consistent with the view of the Tanakama of another Brisa, and that our Mishnah is actually the view of one opinion. What you can have, well, the question that often gets asked is sort of, how do you have a majority viewpoint in a Mishnah or a Brisa that contradicts a majority viewpoint in the other? That is a reasonable question, and here we have resolved that by saying that our Mishnah is actually, even though it looks to be a unanimous opinion, is actually the opinion of only one viewpoint, and so therefore, we have made the two consistent with one another. That's the nature of the questions that usually get asked. It's not so much that we have a Mishnah that says something different from a Brisa, but it's how it says something different that is going to be the basis of the question. Okay.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that a Mishnah would say something different from Brisa.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah, it's how we explain it. That's the question, is understanding that. Okay, well, we'll pick up, God willing, with the Mishnah at the top of Daf Pei, God willing, tomorrow, and looking forward to continuing our learning together. Have a great day.